Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So my name is Rajesh Zani bin Raja Mansur. So for this assignment 2, I would want to present about mechanical hazard for safety and health for engineers. So for this group 8, there are 5 members including me. First is Iqbal Hafiz, Nur Shafika, Nur Fadalina and Nur Shamimi. So I will continue for the first part is include introduction. So what is mechanical hazard? So mechanical hazard is mechanical dangers are those that are caused by the use of or exposure to power or manually operate equipment, machinery and plant as well as their components. Mechanical injuries are most commonly caused by contact with or entanglement with machinery or both. So the example is sharp edge, hot surface, moving parts, flywheels, pulleys, belt and other components of the machinery could be pose a threat to workers' health and safety. So let's continue. And okay, so where mechanical hazard occur? So there are 3 points here, and the first is the point of operation. The point of operation is the location where work on the material is done, such as cutting, shaping, pouring, and so on. So the second is equipment for transferring power. So component of the mechanical system responsible for transferring power to the component or part of the machine that is executing the work. So the last is mechanically moving component. This is component of a machine that move while the machine is in operation. So be careful for this mechanical hazards. So for the next part, we will continue to the next member. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Muhammad Iqbal Hafiz Permaizi, the presenter of this title, Hazard Identification and OS Act Relate High Red Table. Now we're going to move to mechanical hazards. What we know about mechanical hazards? Mechanical hazards are hazards created by the utilization of or exposure to either powered or powered by hand equipment, machinery, and plant. Mechanical injuries are caused either by entanglement or contact with machinery. A part of the machinery that would be hazardous to workers include sharp edges, hot surfaces, moving parts, flywheel, pulley, belt, and something like that. One of the biggest hazards is unguarded machinery and equipment. One of the biggest hazards to meat packaging, poultry, and food processing workers is unprotected machinery and equipment. Workers' fingers, arms, hair, and other body parts may be caught or entangled by unprotected machine parts or equipment. Most protective clothing worn by meat processing, poultry, and food processing workers, such as gloves, gowns, aprons, and rain gear, can be caught and push workers into the machine. The second one is faulty of electrical machine and equipment. The nominal power supply in the workplace is typically 230 volts single phase and 400 volts, which is three phase, although some larger workplaces will be powered by a higher supply voltage. The following information refers to workplaces using 230 and 400 volt power supplies. The main dangers of the use of electricity are contact with live parts that cause electric shocks and burn failures that can cause fire. The fire or explosion where electricity can be ignition source in a potentially flammable or explosion environment such as paint booth. Moving to the next slide, working at hazard and control measure. The definition of work at height should also be considered, as well as the risk of falling from the height of a roof, ladder, or scaffolding while performing the job. There is also the risk of people falling while working in any place where a person could fall from a distance far may cause injury. This includes getting in and out of work at height, in and or under the ground, and the risk of falling through materials fragile. The final one is the most common hazard is slips and trips hazard. Generally speaking, slips and trips are caused by the loss of traction between the shoes and the working surface, or inadvertent contact with fixed or moving object that may cause falls. There are many conditions that can cause slips, trips, and falls: wet or greasy floors, dry floors, which wood chips, or dust uneven walking surface. Maybe it can cause death, but it may cause injury. That's all from me. Thank you.
This is the hierarchy table. So from the hierarchy table, we need to put hazard identification, risk analysis, and risk control. Okay, we have 4 work activity. The first one is food processing machine. So the hazard is unguarded machinery. Effect of the workers, the finger, arms, hair, and others body part may be cut. And to exist risiko control, warning signs and training. And for the risk, it is very low, which is 9. And to recommended control measures, we need to use leather glove. The PIC is Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994, Section 24. The next one is spark due to irregular use. The effect is endangering the health of an individual with a spark. So the existing risiko control is placed walkway clearly, because the risiko is very highest, which is 16. So to recommended control measures is wearing the eye protection on Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994, Section 24. The second work activity is scrape the paint using a grinder machine. The hazard is faulty electrical machine. Okay, the part of the hand that meet a grinder machine cause an electric shock, then that can cause a fire. So the existing risiko control is use a glove, and the risk is very highest. So to recommend control measure, we need to wearing the eye protection. The third activity is replace a fault factory lamp. The highest is working at heat hazard. So it can cause loss of life of several blow to the head and body part involved. The existing risk control is safe work practice, and the risk of the highest hazard is very highest. So to risk control, you need to wear a proper safety helmet. For the last one is lifting a 70 kg box. So the hazard is slips and trips hazard. It will cause slipping and leg will be broke and sprained. So the existing risk control is safety shoes or wear proper footwear. The risks are just low, which is 6. And to recommend control measure, we need to use the right PPE for our system. For example, use the head protection. That's all for me.
My name is Nur Shafika Binti Maknawi, so I can proceed our presentation with risk assessment. A risk assessment have 5 process. The first one, identify. In this step, risk factor, the triggering events, their cause and each risk potential consequence will be identified. The second one, analyze. The nature and level of risk will be qualitatively or quantitatively analyzed. Then risk analysis will provide a picture of the cause and consequence and aims to describe the risk. And the third one, planning. Preventive and corrective action will be planned and scheduled based on the risk level and priority. And the fourth one, follow-up, monitoring and implementation of the action plans. And the last one, control, effective monitoring of measures taken where mechanism of prevention and protection. Risk assessment have three methods. There is qualitative, quantitative, and semi-quantitative. For the first one, qualitative, the risk factor is identified and its impact and likelihood are assessed. This method classifies and categorizes the risk based on its risk level, usually high, medium, or low. The risk control or control measure shall take place based on the urgency of the risk level. And the second one, quantitative, requires a systematic framework or model that can quantify the likelihood of the risk using mathematics to calculate the probability of risk. And the last one, semi-quantitative approach provides an intermediate level between the textual evaluation of qualitative risk assessment and the numerical evaluation of quantitative risk assessment by evaluating risk with a score. Qualitative risk assessment that we can use this table to define consequence, probability, and level of risk significance levels such as high, medium, and low. The advantage for qualitative risk assessment and the first one, applicable, it is able to identify the priority and urgency of risk, and simple approach is easily to understood. Then quantitative risk assessment, risk metric is used to judge the risk with combination between severity and likelihood. And this table is about action of high, medium, and low. The advantage of quantitative risk assessment. The first one, provide an adequate understanding of failure, consequence, and events. Easy to understand the overall process, reach the appropriate decision, and allocate resource based on quantitative data rather than qualitative opinion. And the last one, semi-quantitative risk assessment. Use statistical numerical rating scale for consequence and probability and combine them to produce a level of risk. The advantage of semi-quantitative risk assessment, being able to evaluate a larger number of risk issues than quantitative risk assessment because a full mathematical model is unnecessary.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Faradina binti Muhammad Khairul Faisal. Today we want to present about suggestion to control the risk. Hierarchy of control. Hierarchy of control is a system that controls the various risks present in the workplace. For the risks we go through or the risks in the factory. In this case, we will explain what a hierarchy of control and at the same time help employers to understand the use of hierarchy of control to reduce risks in the workplace. Hierarchy of control is a system that can control risk in the factory. It's also one of the initial approaches to know step by step for eliminate or reduce risks. There are three types of control risks, from the highest level to the lowest. Danger and risk can be eliminated by their handling in the highest handling in a hierarchical system. This is followed by replacement, isolation, and engineering control. Then, risk reduction through administrative handling. Furthermore, to reduce risk using personal protective equipment (PPE) is the lowest level of control. This is the hierarchical pyramid from the most effective control to the most effective. Next, eliminate hazard and risk. The level to eliminate hazard as well as risk is the plan in the highest, but the control shown in the most effective control. Second, reduce risk. When we use large machine that are available in the factory, we need to reduce the risk of injury to the user. To reduce risk, there are 3 types to control that need to be done. Among them, there are substitution, isolation, and even engineering. For substitution means replacing its risk with a lower risk. Isolation is to isolate people from the risk. Therefore, engineering is to reduce the risk of work system or engineering change. Administrative control, it is a very low protection and less reliable. Therefore, we must use good administration to minimize exposure to machine hazard in the factory. And the last one is protective personal equipment, PPE. The level of protection for PPE is the lowest and the control is the most unreliable. So therefore, use equipment that can protect yourself from danger. Work equipment that needs to be prioritized in the factory. The equipment in question is quite a lot. Among them are hand tools, lifting equipment, laboratory equipment, photocopy, and so on. Only people with sufficient knowledge of user can use the equipment in the factory. Prevention of access to dangerous machine. The employer must take effective measure to prevent the machine or stop every movement of the machine before there is a visit of an employee into the dangerous trap. In health and safety law, the term dangerous part has been written low. For example, if there is a piece of work that can cause injury to the user, it can be considered a very dangerous part. Suitability of work equipment. Before using the work equipment, we need to study whether the equipment is suitable for use in such work and the function of the equipment. There are 2 groups of law that can address the problem of work equipment research. Among them are manufacturers and suppliers who need to know what to do and need to confirm whether the product has met the requirement of health, safety, and can ensure consumer safety or not. Use and maintenance of equipment with certain risiko. From the work equipment carried out in the factory involve many risks, especially of the health and safety of workers. A hierarchy of control should be used to reduce the risk of eliminating the risk, but if the risk is not well controlled, is it necessary to take appropriate software measure, such as a safe work system? To avoid risk in the factory, it is preferable to only skilled workers to operate the machine in the factory, whether to modification, repair, maintenance, and so on. Controlling mechanical hazard. To control mechanical hazard in the factory, there are 3 step-by-step that need to be known. Among them are engineering control, administrative control, and personal protective equipment. In controlling mechanical hazard, the appropriate control used is engineering control. This control can physically change the machine or work environment to avoid exposure to hazard. So the engineering control is replace equipment of process to reduce hazard. Administrative control is process, right and operation, permission to work and practice working safety. Personal protective equipment, PPE, is eliminate hazard in the factory while using mechanical tool, as well as when safe work practice do not provide additional protection. Where we are operating large equipment and machine available in the factory, there is a possibility that the worker's limb or finger may be injured. So this accident is very potentially fatal as well. Maintenance and inspection. Equipment or machine in the factory must be maintained neatly by well so that they can operate properly and safety. So for maintenance, it depends on the amount of equipment used. Maintenance of equipment in the factory should be focused on the part and need to be take care of the prevent risks to the health and safety of workers and user. Amount in technique planner, condition based and damage based maintenance. Inspection are generally for regular inspection or formal exercise to ensure continuous safe operation. In addition, inspection are also a formal process to check that something is in the correct condition or not, as well as the person competent for inspection is usually an employee, but there may be circumstances where an outside competent person will be employed. Therefore, an inspection must be carried out after installation for the first time, after assembling in the new location, and appropriate interval. Okay, suggestion to control the risk. Okay, this is a table to suggest the risks. Okay, the first hazard is unguarded machinery and equipment. To control measure the unguarded machine is add a barrier to the food processing machine. It is to ensure that workers will not exceed the safety line while working. This can reduce the danger that will be faced by factory workers as well as slow down the prevention of hazard. And to personal protective equipment, we must wear safety glove properly and wear a goggle. The description is it can provide protection to the hand of worker when using this food processing machine so that the hand are not injured and not cut, which can cause danger, and to protect the eyes from spark or small particulate matter. The second hazard is faulty electrical machine and equipment. To control measure for the hazard, is make sure the machine has a stop button or an emergency stop key. The description is able to access to cut off highest electrical power while in an emergency. To personal protective equipment, PPE, we must wear rubber glove because it can slow down the electric shock to the whole body. The third table is working at highest hazard and control measure. So to control the highest hazard, we need to provision of appropriate work equipment and stable and storage surface. The description for provision of appropriate work equipment is to prevent the occurrence of faults such as heat protection, and the description of stable and storage surface have sufficient dimensions to allow safe use for people, plant and material, as well as have appropriate methods to prevent fault. The hierarchy of control by personal protective equipment, we must wear a proper safety helmet and wear a hanger and left rope wheel in high place. The description is avoid hitting the head hard when falling and can keep workers from continuing to fall down and can save life. The last hazard to control is slip and trips hazard. To control this hazard, housekeeping and cleanliness program in the workplace. The description about this, it is necessary to wash, clean and dispose of waste of the floor immediately after using the machine to prevent workers from slipping. To personal protective equipment, we must wear safety shoes because to prevent falling and be able to withstand pressure and be able to protect the feet from stepping on sharp object.
Assalamualaikum, I'm Nur Shamini and I will base on my part for assignment 2 where my part is conclusion. So in the conclusion, require understanding and learning from each individual about hierarchy, where the hierarchy is hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control. So as to be able to consider what the lack of loss is to anyone in the circumstance of a selected case and the possible severity that could arise. Next, assess the safety awareness and safety training needs of factory workers with relation to hazard in the factory. Assess contractors' safety awareness, appropriate improvement measure. Systematic training of workers is required so as to manage their personal safety from dangers in the factory. Then, there should be committee in each department which is responsible for security in their department so that members in the department are better protected and safer. Nextly, for hazard identification also should be properly documented even within the simplest of situations. Risk assessments must include a careful assessment of both likelihood and consequence. Control measures should conform to the recommendation of the hierarchy of control. Then, nextly, it's foreseeable that the employment of machines and automation will still increase from time to time, as will the quantity of the regulations addressing machine safety. The greater of quantity of machine, the greater the risk they will get. These presents signify the necessity for skills in machine risk assessment and safeguarding practice. So then, get the professional who can help them manage the risk to associate with their machine better. Thank you.